No, it's fine. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to yet another amazing conversation with a young professional in the sector. As you all know, we are commemorating Arbor Week 2020 by hosting a virtual campaign called the Tree of Knowledge, where we're just ensuring that information, knowledge, and just sharing some insights with you guys, not only about the environment, but about some of our young professionals in the sector. Today, I'm joined by a dear friend of mine, Philip Frenzel, who is a junior freshwater ecologist at the Freshwater Consultancy Group. He is a member of the Western Cape Wetlands Forum Steering Committee, and he's also a board member of the South African Wetlands Society. Philip, welcome.
Hi, Margot. Thank you so much for the invite. It's such an honor.
Thank you so much for making the time to join us and just being a part of this campaign that's so dear to my heart. And I'm just so excited to get to September and finally post these videos and just allow people to have this information freely. So we're going to jump straight into the conversation. What are some of the roles that you do as a young professional at the Freshwater Consultancy Group?
Right. So I guess the best part of the line of work that I'm in is the fact that there's a balance between office work and field work. I know many corporate jobs aren't quite as lucky to get that experience and be outdoors and to experience the beautiful nature, and especially here in Cape Town, just the incredible beauty that we have all around us, and we don't need to go very far. So yeah, I'll classify them in the two broad categories, so the field work and then more office type work. So field work is always a lot of fun. It is the collection of data. Being in the freshwater field, it often involves doing a SAS assessment. So it's a biomonitoring technique that you look at the macroinvertebrates within a river. It involves measuring discharge. There are a lot of other things like wetland delineation that require fieldwork as well. So that's often really nice to do, but it's not always out in the field. Then coming back into the office, it's about processing and collating all that data and creating it into something meaningful that the client needs. So that depends from project to project. So yeah, I guess that's where data interpretation. So firstly, capturing the data of a high quality, and then interpreting the data to really understand what is the environment telling us about the current conditions. And that's a big thing, is what is the current condition? What is a potential impact that could happen through a proposed activity, and then consolidating all of this into a report, which then gets delivered to the client. So I guess it depends really on what the project is, first of all. But yeah, so it's quite a vast array of different activities. And which always keeps you on top of your game, but it's a lot of fun though.
Great stuff. And as I mentioned earlier, we are, the conversation that I aim to have is really just around environmental protection and just making, especially our young graduates, more interested in the environmental and water sector. So in your opinion, should we start separating the different aspects of the environment and deal with it in isolation? Or do you think by collectively dealing with it, we can affect the change that we want to see in terms of environmental protection?
I mean, it is way easier to separate everything and deal with everything in its silo, I guess. But the real challenge is really managing the environment and ensuring its protection by having a holistic approach to managing the environment. So on the one hand, I'm primarily focused on freshwater, but there's also other components that need to be considered in, for example, an environmental impact assessment. So it's about really, tying in all of those different aspects to really effect change and to ensure the protection. So yeah, I think it's easier said than done, though. I do put that disclaimer out there, but I do think it is the best approach to rather manage the environment and ensure its protection through a collective and holistic manner. Yeah, I think also if you look at the whole, environment, there's so many different components to it. And so we need to have a system that is intact in order for the system to be resilient, and especially in the face of climate change. So I think it's really important to look at the bigger picture and the whole picture, as opposed to just keeping everything separate, which might be easier to maintain and manage, and at the end of the day, protect.
Definitely. And what are some of your views on the relationship between water and biodiversity? And I asked this question because, as you mentioned earlier, you do get to do a lot of field work and you get to sort of interact and understand the environment at large. So just what are your thoughts around the relationship between water and biodiversity?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, to start off with, I think it's really important to state that water and biodiversity are so interlinked. And I guess that comes with the background and the context of a healthy catchment in which we live, and is looking at the system as a whole. And so if we have a healthy catchment, we have healthy rivers and we have healthy wetlands, which in effect, provide us with so many ecosystem services, which we as humans really benefit from. And the best part of it is that we benefit for free, So if we need to industrialize and mechanize all of these services that nature so generously provides to us, it's crucial that we look after the environment to ensure that these linkages and that the biodiversity, that those linkages are intact, so that we can I guess so that we can ensure that the system is healthy and in effect have a resilient system. So just as an example, I mean, if we have wetlands in our catchments, they really look after us. They provide so many functions in terms of trapping sediments, purifying water, and a whole list of other benefits. So that's, and also obviously to house and other biota, such as, for example, the Western Cape leopard toad, which is also endangered. So it's if we look after the catchment as a whole and all the biodiversity that exists in them, then we get benefits such as clean water, which I just draw back into the context in which I am playing at the moment from a professional perspective. So I think just resilience, healthy systems equals resilient systems, and that really is a massive benefit to humans. So I think we need to start that frame of work, that frame of mind needs to really be there to ensure that we ensure the protection at the end of the day.
Yeah, and then just to follow up on that question, again, just in your opinion, what are some of the mechanisms that we can apply to ensure that we maintain this balance between water conservation and the existence of biodiversity? Because in most cases, and hence I asked the question earlier about treating it in isolation, we tend to focus on the need and the demand of something. So in 2017, 2018, our focus was the drought, and all we focused on was water conservation, and not looking at all the other interlinked aspects to our vegetation needing water, controlling our plantation fires and our forest fires, those sort of things. So just how do we maintain a balance between water conservation and the existence of biodiversity?
I think that's always the million-dollar question. How do we effectively take all of these considerations and all of the needs that are really out there? So it's human needs, which often are an overarching feature in terms of decision making, but also that biodiversity has its own needs. And I guess there are various tools that have been developed and different concepts such as the ecological reserve to ensure that there's a minimum amount of water, for example, that the environment needs to function. But I think, you know, there are different levels in which we can approach these different mechanisms, and that is kind of, so what can you and I do on a daily basis that will ensure that water is conserved, that the environment is preserved as a whole? And so, you know, I think on an individual basis we have a lot of power, and that is really, you know, it links to our daily habits. So, you know, it's as simple as stop wasting water, or recycle, and all of these really basic things that we can do, and you know, it's the small things that add up quite quickly. And so I think, you know, just sustainable living is quite important. And then, you know, one step up, I guess, is kind of supporting different organizations that lobby for the protection of the environment. Be that in volunteering your time over a weekend, or be that financial assistance if that's possible, or anything of that sort. And then I guess in my line of work, it's also really, you know, keeping in mind that the environment is, at the end of the day, your client. And I think that is something really important to keep in mind when approaching proposed developments, for example, or anything of that sort. And then I guess a different mechanism is the more formalized approach that government institutions and organizations hold in terms of enforcing all the environmental laws. And then as a citizen, if you see something that just doesn't look right or something, you know, there are various hotlines in which you can report any incidents or anything that can be you know, investigated further. So I think those are very, you know, practical ways in which we can get involved in really ensuring that, you know, water is preserved and conserved, but also that, you know, we live in such a biodiverse part of the world, and you know, we don't need to go very far to experience that. And so, you know, it's all these daily choices that we make that can actually, at the end of the day, have a big influence. So I think the power is really in our hands.
Yeah. And then obviously in your role as a member of the Western Cape Wetlands Forum and also the South African Wetland Society, you've been quite involved with especially celebrating and commemorating World Wetlands Day, which is an objective of education and awareness. So what are your thoughts around the importance of environmental education and awareness?
I think it's just so crucial. I mean, that is just really the bottom line. And, you know, education goes beyond just the youngsters. I mean, they're probably the most important ones, because they're the ones that are going to inherit the world that we leave behind. So it's crucial from that perspective to create some kind of interest, and that, you know, the environment can also be fun. There's so many, I think we need to instill that curiosity of looking at the environment and seeing, you know, all the little intricacies and the details. And I mean, that just takes you back to childhood, where you, as a child, you're so fascinated by this little bug that you saw and that. So I think, you know, environmental education is really about rekindling that getting in touch with nature as a child. And this is particularly important now in a world where we're moving more towards on-screen time, not only from adults and in your professional life and stuff, but even kids. So they're getting out of touch to, you know, all of these amazing things that they just need to go outside and and explore a bit. Yeah. So I think environmental days, such as, like you said, the World Wetlands Day, in which we regularly host, really serves to educate people, and also to really highlight the benefit that the environment provides for us as well. And I guess at the end of the day, every little bit helps. And you know, the more people that we can get on board with, hey, we need to live sustainably, or, you know, all of these things they might appear small, but they're really, really important to ensure that we have long-term sustainability of our environment and our resources, which are finite. So I guess the quote that really resonates with me when it comes to that is that we do not inherit the earth from our ancestors, but we borrow it from our children. And that to me is such a stark reminder how important it is that we look after the environment, but then also to make sure that people are aware of its beauty and so that we can minimize the damage that we've already caused and minimize the damage going forward.
Definitely. And I just love what you say now, because it actually just took me back to World Wetlands Day this year, and you were doing an interview. And there was this thing that you said that really just stuck with me when they asked you about why was it so important to bring the learners to the wetland, and you answered in lines of saying that, we want to allow the children to interact with nature. We want them to see, feel, and engage with nature. And we want them to not only be taught about the importance of wetlands and the environment, but physically come into contact with it so that they can see why it is so important to continue this message of conservation and protection. So yeah, I mean, you embody that answer so much, and I mean, you are someone that is so dynamically involved with every single year ensuring that we get to have an amazing and a successful World Wetlands Day. So yeah, thank you for that.
Well, thank you also for partnering with us.
So we are celebrating Arbor Week, something that is very dear to my heart as a young activist. But for you personally, what are your thoughts around Arbor Week, and why do you think it's so important that we continue celebrating these environmental days of importance?
I think Arbor Week is like any environmental awareness day, which really highlights to a different component of the environment. And so I think Arbor Week tries to do that. So I think it's kind of sharing the sentiments that I was saying just now about just raising awareness of the different components of the environment, and different components speak to different people. I mean, some people are super passionate about birds, some people are super passionate about plants, some people like myself are super passionate about water.
Wetlands.
So if we wetlands in particular. So if we can, really touch on all the different aspects that get people excited about the environment, I think we've got a strong army to fight with against the ever destruction that happens in our environment, and that we see unfortunately continuing. So I think it's really there to highlight what we have and what we shouldn't actually afford to lose. So there's that component as well, that we're on this one-way trajectory at the moment, and it's up to us to really make sure that we change that trajectory. And I think that's where all these environmental awareness days and commemorations are so important.
Yeah, just to let you guys in on the inside joke about the wetlands, I always say that if wetlands should ever completely just no longer exist, I feel like there's two people that will literally fight us to the grave, and that's Philip and Shadai. So Shadai's interview is coming a little bit later. So you guys are going to get a chance to meet Shadai, and we'll touch more on the inside joke. But I literally, every year at World Wetlands Day, I tease Shadai and Philip about the fact that if they are just the ultimate advocates for wetlands. So that's where the wetland show comes in. So Philip, I just wanted to give a little bit of insight to your professional life. So looking back on your journey, what made you choose a career in science?
So growing up, I was very fortunate in growing up in KwaZulu-Natal actually, and there's so much nature also surrounding where we grew up, and my parents really took us to a lot of game reserves, which kind of instilled a really deep and passionate love for the environment. And so that's where it really all started, is really being exposed as a young child to the natural beauty, which is really close to home. And so that was that was the start. And then I've always had an obsession with water, really. Like, don't waste water, or all of these things. And I think that's kind of where it started. And when it came to the decision of, okay, so how do I take this forward in terms of my professional life? That is really, it was a strong consideration when also choosing what to study. So I think that's where it all started, and then the journey kind of more formalized into tertiary education. But yeah, I guess it's that exposure as a young child which really chose, or which really put forward the way to go into a scientific field.
Okay. And then how do you think we can just continue motivating and encouraging young academics and young graduates to pursue a career in the water and environmental sector? I always say that I wish I could have every single one of them join me just one day in the field, so that they can see not only the pleasure, but the beauty in being one with nature. So what are just some of the ways that we can continue to motivate them into the field?
I think that's really important. I think we really do need to motivate and reassure young graduates in particular that there is a way in which you can make a living, and a decent living, in very tough times, and that you can it is possible. And I think those the people that are in the environmental field, especially young people, really are quite fortunate, because it is quite difficult to enter. Jobs are scarce either way, but I think the mindset when you come into the environmental sector is that you need to be prepared to start at the bottom and really volunteer your time. So it's really important to build those networks and that experience, so that you can also offer, in whatever capacity or in whatever field in the environmental sector you go into, that you have something to offer the employer, which is beneficial to the organization. So I think we can really really try and encourage them by really talking to them if they are feeling down and stuff. And I think it's really trying to instill some kind of perseverance that once you've got your foot in the door, it is a lot easier to move around. So it's just about getting your foot in the door. And I guess that's always the hardest, but it is worth it. And it can be very rewarding. Like you say, when you go out and you see all this incredible beauty all around, there's no price tag to that. So I think if there is scope for us in the working field to take people along, I think that's something that we could do, and also just be like, hey, this could be you in a couple of years' time or something like that. I think that is also a responsibility that we have. And
for some odd reason, I don't know if it's just me, but I get this sense of complete joy when I go out there and I have this moment of like, I am someone that is responsible for monitoring and protecting this water resource. And just, I think that sense of accountability and knowing that you play such an important part in protecting these resources and the environment also just contributes to you enjoying your job so much more. Okay. I have lost Philip for a second. We do apologize for that. Oh. Sorry guys, we are back. We had a little bit of a technical issue there, but we are back just to wrap up this session with Philip. Before technology threw us out the door, I was just telling you that for me personally, sometimes when I go out into the field, there's the sense of joy and pride that I get when I get to stand back and know that, me, the person, I get to play that role in protecting and safeguarding and just being that custodian. And that's also just something that I always tell young graduates and academic learners, you know, there's just that sense of pride that you get knowing what it is that you are not only working towards and for, but also what you're doing to ensure that this thing just continues generation after generation.
Absolutely.
And Philip, what are
Absolutely.
just some of just a few highlights to mention that you've had so far in your career?
Sure. Well, quite a few. So I guess the annual highlight is really going to the National Wetlands in Darwin, which really is quite a unique experience. Just because you're surrounded by a whole bunch of wetland enthusiasts, wetland and river enthusiasts, who really have the same common goal when it comes to protecting the environment. And I guess that's always nice and reassuring to be a part of as well. So I think that's always an annual highlight to go to. And then I must say, being involved with the Western Cape Wetland Forum for quite a number of years already has been really quite a blessing as well. And really sharing that information and being the person to always contact and organizing things like the World Wetlands Day events and stuff. It's really really inspiring to be involved in something that is a lot larger than yourself. And then as of 1.5 years ago, being elected onto the board of the South African Wetland Society, which is, I guess, one step above the provincial forum. So I guess they have different roles to play, but being able to be a part of a collective that has one goal, and to really further wetland science as a whole is really quite amazing. So I must say those have really been highlights in my very short working career so far. And just working with really passionate individuals, both previously at the Freshwater Research Center, but then also now at the Freshwater Consulting Group. Great mentors which have really inspired me as well and keep me inspired. Yeah, it's a blessing.
As I've mentioned, I had the privilege of working with Philip, so we do have this annual collaboration relationship. So every year, around about the 1st or the 2nd, depending on what day the 2nd initially falls on, the 2nd of February. But yeah, you can follow us on social media, to partners and organizations that wants to jump on board. We always welcome the support. We usually tend to go very big for World Wetlands Day. So a lot of sponsors, a lot of help, a lot of hands is always welcome. So you can find out more about that on social media. I'm someone that is very vocal on social media about events. And then you can just support us where you can. Philip, thank you so much for making the time to be a part of this virtual campaign. I just loved talking to you today. And like I said, the aim and the objective is just to not only inspire people to get involved in the sector, but also just make knowledge freely available so people can have insights to what we do and why we do what we do. So thank you so much for being a part of it and for joining me today.
It's a massive pleasure, and thank you very much for the invite. It's really been an amazing